Thank you, Pastor Justin. And thank you, New Creation Church, for welcoming me and my wife, Sam, into your congregation. I don't know what Pastor Justin's comment was about worship and praise to start off. I thought it was wonderful, and you guys had me in tears because the lyrics that we sang today are so true, that a firm foundation can only be found in God. And so thank you for the wonderful music. And I think Justin may have been preparing you guys also, letting you know that it's not the content of the worship that matters, because I feel very woefully short standing up here preparing to give a message to you, particularly after hearing Skylar's wonderful testimony. That was really enriching. And as I will find and am finding, and as you will find as you go serve in Cuba, it is we who go to serve that gain the most. In our giving, we find that it is we who receive. Before going into the sermon, would you please join me in prayer? Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for this time of worship, a time that you have gathered us together so that we may praise your name. Please pour out your Holy Spirit on us gathered here so that we might glorify your name. May the meditation of all of our hearts this afternoon be pleasing to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So as Pastor Justin mentioned, I am still in seminary. I'm in seminary, but I've been appointed to serve in a ministry field. And if a few of you decide to answer a call to ministry and attend seminary, you will find one of the questions that gets asked starting your first day of seminary is, what's your call story? What brought you here? And it's so fitting that the lectionary readings for this week give us this passage from 1 Samuel, explaining Samuel's call story. I think if we've been in the church, we're familiar with this story. Samuel waking up in the middle of the night, hearing his name being called, and dramatically answering with Eli's help, "Here I am, Lord. Speak, for your servant is listening." We sing it in the United Methodist Church. "Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart." This is actually my grandfather's call story. You know, before, when I heard the story being told by my parents, I really couldn't believe it. And there may be some of you who listen to this story and go, really? God calling your name in the middle of the night? I know I haven't personally heard God calling my name. Could it be possible? And yet, this 20-something school teacher in war-torn Korea heard his name being called in the middle of the night. And he answered that call by going down to his local church, where he found the priest awake, who prayed over him. This repeated for a month until he said yes to God and entered seminary. This is a story of my grandparents' conversion And it was the story that was lingering in my heart when I found my heart being strangely warmed. Stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic in Chicago, while my mother was out visiting my ailing grandfather, who was terminally ill. I remember sitting in the car, thinking back to him saying yes to a voice that he heard that had led my family to America, that had met me sitting right there. Because our call and the answer to that call, when you think about it, it's not rational. It doesn't make sense. In fact, me standing up here speaking to you guys today doesn't make sense. My wife Sam and I were on this month-long vacation before we begin this new ministry. And I promised her, I said, Sam, we'll take this month and it'll be just for us, right? No distractions. We'll replenish, and then we'll be able to pour out once we're in New Jersey. But we got a phone call. Would you be willing to deliver a message on Sunday? The rational side of me said, no, of course not. Are you kidding me? But when we say yes to God, when God begins to order our lives, our actions look different. Because it's not rational. It's hearing a voice in the middle of the night and saying, yes, here I am, Lord. Now, usually, when you hear this message from 1 Samuel, the message ends with the dramatic yes, here I am, Lord. But it's not that simple in our walk to faith. In fact, if you keep reading in this chapter, I think Eli's story is what jumps out and lingers as a more accurate portrayal of what happens when we begin to say yes to God and what that looks like. Because when we say yes to God and when we say, here I am, Lord, your servant is listening, the things that God has to say to us, that light is blinding and it hurts. The light and what it reveals hurts. For those of you familiar with the story, when Eli finds Samuel, he asks, what did the Lord tell you? Because those of us who have had a born-again experience know that that experience wakens you up, opens your eyes, you're able to see so clearly, so vividly what had been blinded from your vision from before. And Eli knows Samuel has a message to share to him. In fact, he had heard a message from a man of God in the prior chapter that warned him, Eli, you are not putting God first. You are not honoring God. In fact, you're honoring your family instead of God. And so Eli knows there is a message for him coming from Samuel, who bears God's light now. And interestingly, I think this is the even bigger miracle, Samuel actually gives him the news. And it's not good news. He says, Eli, God's favor has passed you by because of how you have not honored God. that your sons will die. Folks, when we encounter God, before there is new life, there is death. And what Samuel delivered to Eli was a message of death. Because back in those days, the understanding of an everlasting life was lived through your family. So when he was being told both of his sons were going to die, it meant his heirs, his future was over. And what does Eli have to say when he hears this? He says, "It is the Lord. So be it." During my wife and I's road trip out here, I had one of the best days of my life in Denver, Colorado. It seemed like everything was going right. We caught a baseball game at Coors Field, and if you guys have been to Coors Field, it's a beautiful baseball stadium. You can see the Rocky Mountains from the baseball field. It's incredible. But the thing that really stood out was a comment that she made to me. She said, "Joe, you're a perfectionist." I had known this. I had known this because, paradoxically, perfectionists are the worst procrastinators. I think there may be a few perfectionists in here too. But the reason why we don't get our tasks done in an orderly fashion is because we want to do it so perfectly with delay doing it until the last moment. I'd known this about myself, but I didn't want to see it. And when she said it, I knew that it was coming from love so I could accept it. But I had to fight it. My initial instinct was to say, "No, I'm not a perfectionist. You've got it wrong. No, that's not me." But it was the best thing that could have possibly been given to me. And I could receive it because it was coming from love. In fact, I don't think we can receive criticisms of ourselves, criticisms that cut to the very core of who you are, unless we know that it is coming from a place of love. In John chapter 4, when Jesus is visiting with a Samaritan woman, he asks her, "Where is your husband?" And she says, "Sir, I don't have a husband, I have 5. And he commends her for it. And later in the chapter, he says, we are to worship God in spirit and in truth. The Spirit is something we have no control over. The Spirit comes and goes like the wind, blowing wherever it wishes. But the truth, like Skylar said, it's a command. We have a choice. We have a choice to accept truth. And that truth is about ourselves and what the light reveals. And what it reveals is our brokenness. It's not your brokenness, it's not my brokenness only, it's our collective brokenness. The brokenness of this world. The brokenness that Jesus Christ came to heal. one interesting thing about Samuel's story, after he points out how Eli had failed to honor God before his family, is that Samuel, if you keep reading, Samuel's sons also turn out just as crummy. Maybe it's the fate of pastors' kids everywhere, but yes, it's not just Eli. It's not just Samuel, it's all of us. In order to fully receive this truth, we have to know Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son to us. This is the Christian message, that you are loved exactly where you are. What the psalmist says is true. The God who searches your heart, knows you fully as you are. And it's to that individual that Jesus Christ has been sent. Not to the individual you wish to be, not to the individual you project onto the people around you, but as you are, the you, right here, right now. If we receive this message of love, we can hear and accept the things that are true about ourselves. That I'm lazy. That I'm prone to selfishness. That I love to gossip. And I really have a problem with Schadenfreude, which is a German term for delighting in the misfortune of others. And this is who I am. When we approach God, when we say yes to God, these things become visible. Not only about ourselves, but about the people around us. And if there's one lasting message I'd like to leave with you guys, is to not make the same mistake I did. My conversion experience happened so quickly and so rapidly that I felt like I could see everything around me so vividly and clearly. Everyone's faults were exposed. And I couldn't handle it when I went to seminary. I said, why isn't it perfect? Why is everyone so blind? Proverbs says, iron sharpens iron. And we sharpen each other in our interactions. But if our fundamental basis for these interactions isn't love, then it is worth nothing. What the Apostle Paul said is true. You can have faith, you can have hope, but without love, we're but noisy cymbals. And so, for you Samuels in the audience, for you Eli's, may we receive the light that God has to shine onto our lives and receive it where we are. Because God knows where we are. That question of where are you in the Garden of Eden, it's not for God's benefit. It's for us. Where are you? And that question is echoing through time with love. With a love that meets us whether we deserve it or not. Whether we look the part. Whether we have prayed enough. Whether we have done enough good deeds, it meets us right as we are standing. May we be so bold to say, "Here I am, Lord. Speak, for your servant is listening." Thanks be to God.